With me
Okay.
now, Representative Cliff Bentz. Representative, thank you so much for talking to me from your district in Eastern Oregon.
Thanks for giving me this opportunity.
And so what do you think about the legal battle taking place between the Trump administration and the state of Oregon?
I think you're talking about the troop issue,
Yes.
right? Well, I think that the president was forced to bring the issue of federal troops to the forefront, and that's because the Portland Police Bureau, sadly, hasn't been able to or has chosen not to protect the folks in the ICE facility, and that's really sad. The standard, of course, under the law that's applicable, which is 12406 sub 3, is that the authorization of the National Guard is authorized if the president's unable with the regular forces to execute the laws of the United States. And the regular forces would be the Portland Police Bureau, and sadly, I've learned that the Portland Police Bureau has less than half of the people working for it that would be normal for a city the size of Portland. So that's not good. In addition, for whatever reason, the amount of support given to the Police Bureau has been significantly reduced in the past years, down by some 14 million some years ago, and then 2 million, just 1.9 million just here in June. So that combined with the failures of the police, the local police, to respond to calls that ICE has made. They've made 34 calls, I've been told, and only had 18 of them responded to. The fact that the ICE folks, the folks working at ICE, have to step in and defend themselves until violence occurs, and at what point, or which point, the city police arrive to try to arrest people. That shift of risk over to the ICE employees, as opposed to continuing to or being borne by the local police, is simply wrong. So for all those reasons, I think the president was correct in exercising his authority under the 12406 sub 3. It's sad because I don't think anybody wants to have the federal troops brought into their town, but if the president's left with no alternative, then this is what happens.
And so should the Trump administration be allowed to deploy National Guard troops to help keep protesters away from the ICE building in Portland?
Well, that's the question that's before the court right now, whether or not the type of damage being wrought by the folks protesting rises to the level of meeting this standard that I just read, which is is the president unable with regular forces to execute the laws of the United States? And the answer, in my opinion, is that the city police are not willing or adequately staffed to provide the type of protection that the ICE folks are entitled to, or the federal folks are entitled to. And I think there's been a tendency to go through and say, well, there's only been a couple of violent incidents every week or so, so really there's no reason to have to bring federal troops in. But the real question is, why is this a type of behavior being allowed to happen? Protests are fine, but violence is not. And so why haven't the city police stepped up and stopped it? And I also should mention something that is called out in Judge Emmerget's opinion, but hasn't been spoken about, is the 3.5 weeks that the ICE building was forced to be closed because of damage done by these so-called protesters to the ICE facility. And that was between June 13th and July 7th. Why is the fact that the federal government was not able to do its job for 3.5 weeks not something that goes to the heart of whether or not the president's able to execute the laws of the United States? These are the kind of things that absolutely should be in front of everybody. By the way, I'm familiar with Portland. I like Portland. I went to law school in Portland. It's been a great city, and I hope someday it gets back to that level. But this lack of law and order has, and particularly back in 2020, resulted in enormous damage to people and property and property values. And look at your occupancy rates there. So this is hardly a surprise that people across the United States, particularly back in the eastern United States, think that Portland is still a war zone, when in fact it is not. But it definitely still has protests that devolve on occasion into violence, and that shouldn't be happening.
And so do you think those protests outside the ICE facility meet the definition of rebellion or insurrection?
So I guess that's going to be up ultimately to the courts. My uninformed opinion is that they do not, but that's going to be up to the court ultimately to decide. I could go through my understanding, a vague recollection of what both of those require. I think they require some sort of organization. Antifa may be organized; it might meet that level, but I'm not sure that Antifa has been involved in all of these. I simply don't know the facts. What I would say is there's been violence, and there's been obstruction, and there's been interference, and there's been damage, and there's been the expenditure, I think, of $200,000 by the federal government to try to wall up and put plywood around the ICE building. I mean, these kind of things all suggest that the local police are not doing their job to protect the federal activities going on within that building and outside of it when necessary, and that justifies bringing in help. I wish the city police would step up and do their job along with the county folks. For whatever reason, they're not doing so.
And if the courts continue to determine the National Guard troops cannot be deployed in Portland, do you support the president invoking the Insurrection Act?
Well, the Insurrection Act is a complex piece of legislation, quite old. It needs some work to make it more refined, and I would have to see the facts that the president is relying upon before I took a position on that.
Oregon Governor Tina Kotek said on Tuesday that troops aren't necessary and Portland police can handle the protests. Should the president be allowed to send National Guard troops even if governors are opposed?
Right, that certainly has been the case in the past when governors, particularly back in the years when trying to enforce anti-discrimination laws in the South. And so, yeah, the law allows it. It's better, of course, if the governor does agree. But if federal property or federal activities are being inappropriately inhibited or stopped or interfered with, then under the laws I read it, Section 124063, and it appears to me that the president has the right to go ahead with troops, regardless of, he has to inform the governor, but the governor does not have to agree.
Representative, how do you think state and city leaders should be addressing the protests taking place at the ICE facility in Portland?
Well, the state and city leaders need to allow protests. It's an important part of our American structure, but they shouldn't be allowing interference with the activities that are required of our federal employees and federal agencies. They should not be allowing damage to the property that forces the closure for 3.5 weeks of the facility. They shouldn't be allowing damage. They shouldn't be allowing people with machetes to come up and try to, or a person with machete. I think he was tased by somebody. This is the kind of thing that you can't have happen in your city and then expect people to want to visit it and feel safe while they're doing so. I think one of the saddest things about Portland is it has a national reputation now of not being safe, and that is not good for the biggest city, the most important city in Oregon. And I would take it back to the lack of law and order. My brother, one of my brothers, is a former county sheriff, and he's indicated you can't have law without order. And sadly, during 2020, there was an absolute lack of order in Portland, and it's going to take a long time to heal up from that. I commend the mayor for doing his best to try to rebuild the reputation of Portland, but he's going to have to do a better job with his city police force if people are going to feel safe in Portland.
But crime statistics are down in Portland right now over the past several years, so what's your response to that?
Well, I'm happy for it. Thank goodness. I think the murder rate at one time was abysmal. And so thank goodness things are getting better. It's amazing that the police are able to do it with half the number or less of police that is normal for a city of Portland's size. Hooray for the police. The trouble with it is when they're trying to do their job and being so understaffed and underfunded, somebody's going to be left out, and that's going to be other people in Portland. If they do start doing their job around ICE as they should, then you're going to be leaving other people out because you're dramatically understaffed. So the city council's going to have to sit down and work their way through this and figure out how they can make sure people are safe. And this includes every block of activity in Portland. You can't leave out the federal block just because you have some status as a sanctuary state that that somehow is somehow insidiously forcing or allowing that necessary activity to be ignored.
President Trump says Antifa is responsible for the protests at the ICE facility. Do you believe that an organized terrorist group is behind these protests?
I have no idea. The history of Antifa in Portland is long. I think they were formed up there in the early, like 2007 or something. I think the oldest Antifa group in the United States was formed or still exists in Portland. So I guess that's an assumption one could make, but your question requires facts, and I don't have them.
After the arrest of a conservative influencer in Portland, the Trump administration said it would begin reviewing federal funding to Portland. As a member of Oregon's congressional delegation, how would you respond to the administration if cuts were made to the state?
All right, so I'm only vaguely familiar with this, with the facts that you are talking about. I've not looked into why this gentleman was arrested, what the underlying facts are, and so it's probably best that I not comment on it unless I know the facts. I don't. As far as determining how federal funding is going to be allocated, it's been this administration's attempt and certainly Congress's attempt to slow down spending. So one's motive for doing it, I guess you can look at with some interest, but the fact that we need to slow down spending, no one on the Republican side disputes. And so exactly how that is implemented is a question. I will tell you this, there is certain spending that's absolutely essential that needs to be continued and other that isn't, and the challenge is sorting that out.
And so let's talk about the federal government shutdown. As of Wednesday, when we're doing this interview, Senate Republicans and Democrats remain at a standstill. Democrats won't support the Republican short-term funding agreement. Republicans won't support a Democratic-backed spending bill that would extend health care subsidies under the Affordable Care Act and reverse cuts to Medicaid. Would you like to see a compromise?
Well, I'd like to talk about it, that's for sure. And the way to talk about it is to reopen the government so that the people of the United States are not being held hostage while the Democrats try to force an outcome that they lost when they lost the vote on the big bill. That's where the so-called cuts to Medicaid, I think the better approach would be to call them refinements and in attempts to try to make that necessary and essential program work better. But that aside, I think the challenge for all of us is to get the government reopened so we can sit down and have a decent conversation about healthcare in general. Healthcare is a $4 trillion issue, and we need to do our very, very best to make sure that we're spending that money wisely. I don't think we are, and we need to do a better job supplying better healthcare, but we don't need to throw more money at it. We need to figure out how to restructure it so that insurance companies are not taking more than they should, and so that people are getting the care that they need. This is a complicated matter, and anybody that comes in and says they have a simple solution, like suddenly reversing what we did in the big bill or somehow cutting off the $50 billion that's in there to try to help, which the Democrats want to do apparently, that was going to go to or is going to go to rural hospitals, that's ridiculous. So I don't support that kind of an approach. I do support reopening the government, sitting down and talking about these issues.
Federal workers around the country are frustrated over the Trump administration's threats to possibly withhold their back pay. Military families are also bracing for missed paychecks starting next week. What do you make of this, and what are you telling your concerned constituents?
I've been telling my concerned constituents to call Senator Wyden and Senator Merkley and tell them to vote to reopen the government and reverse their vote to close the government. So that's the first thing I would tell not only my constituents, but all of those people watching this program. Call Senator Wyden, call Senator Merkley, tell them to vote to reopen the government. As far as what the president has said about not paying those people who are furloughed or not currently working, that's inconsistent with the law as I understand it. A law was passed saying that people who are sent home during one of these shutdowns will get paid. And so it seems to me that's what will happen. As far as the military not getting paychecks, you're absolutely right. That's going to happen on October 15th, and this is the reason why Senator Wyden and Senator Merkley need to vote to reopen the government. And they need to do it soon because October 15th is the date that our military will not get paid. And so the military needs to get paid. By the way, the reopening only lasts to November 21st. So why in the world that should they choose to vote for this, Senator Wyden and Senator Merkley, they'll keep the government open until the 21st, and they can go through all this again if they so choose. I hope they don't. I hope they go in and vote to reopen, and then we have our discussions, and we pass the appropriation bills that the Republican House has now moved out of committee. There's 12 of them. Several have already passed out, but the rest are ready to go. But we need to reopen the government and move these things forward.
But Republicans do have control, so do you believe that Republicans have any responsibility to try to open up the government?
Yeah, we have control. We have control as long as we have the necessary votes from the Democrats in the Senate. It takes 60 votes. We have 53 votes on the Republican side. One has chosen not to support the reopening because he's concerned about it growing the deficit. He's even more concerned about the Democrat approach, which would grow the deficit by another 1.5 trillion. But it means that we need 8 Democrats to join us. So to say we're in, quote, control, end quote, is incorrect. In order to move a bill, you need 8 Democrats, 60 votes. So it's coming upon them. We've done our part. We voted to keep the government open over and over and over again on the Senate side, one time on the House side. It's time for the Democrats to step up.
Yes, I understand that you need those Democratic votes, but there is no room for any compromise at all between the two sides?
Why would you compromise while the state's being held while the United States is being held hostage? You don't do that. What you do is you reopen and you then discuss in the format that has worked for years what to do and how to do it. That's the proper approach.
How are people in Congressional District 2 impacted by the federal shutdown, and what are you hearing from them?
Well, they're going to be impacted. We have around 10,000 federal employees in my district, and I say around 10,000. We're trying to get that exact number now. I'm not sure about how many are going to be affected by this. I don't know how many are essential and how many are not. We're trying to figure that out. But what we've been telling them is the same thing I've been sharing with you. The Democrats need to step up and help us reopen the government. Doing something while the United States is being held hostage is simply wrong. Let me just point out that the number of people being affected negatively by this shutdown is in the tens of hundreds of millions of people, the people in the United States, all of them. And to say, as the Democrats are saying, that we're going to hold these 100, 200, all of the people in the United States hostage to apparently benefit the few that are affected by when I say few, relatively few, by the Obama tax credits, the ACA tax credits, it really reflects a imbalance, to say the least. So once again, and I've now said it 5 or 6 times, the people listening to this should call Senators Wyden, Senator Merkley, and say, vote to reopen.
I want to ask you about flight disruptions because of air traffic control shortages. LA, Denver, and New York, to name a few, have seen delays. How concerned are you about this, especially from a safety standpoint?
Extremely concerned. The safety part we've addressed in the big bill, which, by the way, Democrats did not support, but we did include in it, we Republicans, $12.5 billion to update the flight control software systems. And this is incredibly important. It's about a third of what's ultimately going to be needed to bring our system of flight control back into a modern state. We've reached out and I've asked various folks about how safe we are when we're flying. I've been assured that we are safe. I was talking to a pilot just a week and a half or so ago about this exact issue in the Boise airport, which I fly out of. So yeah, it's super important. The the challenges that we face right now are huge, and it's because of the shutdown. So again, the fastest, simplest way to get this over is for the 8 Democrats to join we Republicans and reopen the government. That's what needs to happen. Pass the CR. Let's end this closure. Let's get our TSA people paid. Let's get the military paid. And let's discuss these issues the Democrats are so concerned about.
What are your priorities when it comes to Congressional District 2?
I'm sorry, please repeat that.
What are your priorities when it comes to Congressional District 2?
So my primary priority now is to get the government reopened. The secondary priority is to make sure that the work that we have to get done to get our budget bills passed gets done, because it's so important for the various parts of my district that are so reliant upon the federal government for support. And then there's many other things we've been working on, and that includes getting back into the woods, helping with housing, doing our best to make sure that the rural hospitals stay open and use this $50 billion that was in the big bill for transformation to help make people safer and healthier in my district. There's a long list, but water is a huge issue where I live. Timber is a huge issue out in my district. And all of these things need attention, but it doesn't work well when the government is not open.
And another thing impacting your district, OMB Director Russ Vogt terminated $8 billion in federal grants for climate projects. Funding for several projects in your district, including the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub, were cut by the administration. What was the explanation given for those cuts, and what is your response?
Well, my response on the hydrogen hub is that that particular hub, if you studied it carefully, and I have, sadly was dependent entirely upon obtaining extremely inexpensive electricity and a huge amount of it. And so I think the Australian company that was trying to promote it was more interested in that inexpensive electricity than it was necessarily in hydrogen. And thus, it doesn't surprise me that the hydrogen hub got cut. There are other parts of that $8 billion that are extremely important to Oregon, and I will be reaching out to Director Vogt and to the White House on those issues, because there are certain things that I think are going to be necessary and will support economic development and expansion of job opportunities in my district and frankly in all of Oregon. And so yeah, it's one of those things that, yes, I agree with Director Vogt that we need to reduce our spending, but we need to do it carefully, and I think with the input from people like me who know exactly what those cuts mean.
And Representative, you made a decision to switch your town halls to a virtual format rather than in-person town halls. How long will you continue to do that?
Well, it depends on how long we have people that are using my in-person town halls as platforms for filming themselves as they scream out misinformation, scaring older Americans, and particularly older Oregonians in my district. I can't have people going in and pretending to confuse Medicaid with Medicare, and then not cleaning up the mess they create by making that kind of misinformation go live on their social media feeds. That kind of abuse of a town hall meeting is I'm not going to be party to it. But I will tell you that had I completed the 20 town halls I tried to do, I did 4 live town halls, I would have talked to about 7,000 people in person. In my first 3 telephone town halls, I've talked to 31,000 people. And that was just over a short week period. And so one good thing that's come out of this is I've talked to a lot more people, and we've controlled those exchanges of information in a way that precludes the hijacking of those meetings for misinformation dissemination purposes. At some point, I absolutely want to go back to live town halls, but we'll play it by ear and we'll see. We'll test it out here one of these days and see if we can get back to productive live town hall meetings.
Oregon Congressman Cliff Bentz, we appreciate your time and thank you.
Thank you.